Does God exist? Am I influenced by the Holy Scriptures?
Am I real?
Are all of this false and
Am I
true?
dreaming?
The first edition of the book is published in Latin by Michael Solly of Paris at the sign of the Phoenix in 1641, cum privilegio et approbation doctorum, translated as with the privilege and approbation of doctors. The book was published in France.
Second edition. The book was published in Amsterdam in 1642 by Louis Elsevier, accompanied by the now completed Objections and Replies. The work was translated into French by the Duc de Lens in 1642. He acknowledged it as excellent that he had it published some years later.
Rene was able to determine how many of his childhood misconceptions had been accepted as true. Even if he was unsure and understood he needed to seriously commit to ridding himself of all of his opinions, he must have attained a mature age. However, not everything is false, and shall perhaps never arrive at this end, as it's a never-ending task to analyze each one individually. It was stated that most truths are gained either from the senses or through the senses. However, it is not prudent to place complete reliance on them because they are misleading, and we have been deceived before. Despite the fact that our senses can be deceiving at times, there are many others that we cannot rationally doubt, even if we recognize them by their means.
For example, there is this fact that I am here, seated by the fire, attired in a dressing gown, having this paper in my hands and other similar matters. And how could I deny that these hands and this body are mine? Were it not perhaps that I compare myself to certain persons, devoid of sense, whose cerebella are so troubled and clouded by the violent vapors of black bile, that they constantly assure us that they think they are kings when they are really quite poor, or that they are clothed in purple when they are really without covering, or who imagine that they have an earthenware head or are nothing but pumpkins or are made of glass. But they are mad, and I should not be any the less insane were I to follow examples so extravagant. In the habit of sleeping, you may see yourself in your dreams as someone who is more or less insane during the waking moments. How frequently has it happened that I have dreamed that I am in this particular location? In fact, it appears right now that I am staring at this page with awake eyes, that the head I am moving is not dozing off, and that I am extending my hand and noticing it on purpose. Rene questioned this, but as he considered it, he remembered that while sleeping, he had frequently fallen victim to similar illusions. As he carefully considered this perspective, he was shocked to realize that there are no evident indicators that allow us to properly differentiate between awareness and sleep, and he's so amazed. It almost makes him think he's dreaming right now. But now, we can assume that we are asleep and everything that we do is false delusion. And let us reflect that possibly neither our hands nor our whole body are such as they appear to us to be. According to Rene, just like the painted representation, the things that are represented to us in sleep can have been formed as the counterparts of something real and true, and that, in this way, those general things are not imaginary, but things existent. In actuality, painters cannot give sirens and satyr natures that are entirely novel. Instead, they can only create a certain medley of the parts of various animals, or if their imagination is extravagant enough to invent something so novel that nothing similar has ever been seen, in which case their work depicts a thing that is purely fictitious and entirely unreal. For the same reason, even though these abstract concepts may be made up, we must admit that some other, simpler, more universal objects are real and true. From there, just as with some real colors, all of the mental images we have of things that exist in our heads, whether they be true and real or false and fantastic, are created. This category of things includes nature in general, its extension, the shape of extended objects, their number and quantity, as well as the location of these things,
the length of time that separates them from one another, and so forth. That may be the reason he concluded that physics, astronomy, medicine, and all other sciences to study composite objects are very suspect and uncertain. However, arithmetic, geometry, and other comparable areas that just investigate basic and general phenomena without going to great efforts to ascertain if they are real or not contain a certain degree of certainty. Because 2 and 3 always equal 5, a square can never have more than 4 sides, and because these truths are so obvious, it doesn't seem feasible that they could be false, regardless of whether I'm awake or asleep. Rene held the conviction that a mighty God existed who had created him. How do we know, therefore, that despite appearing to us to exist exactly as we currently perceive them, he has not caused it to come to pass that there is no earth, heaven, extended body, magnitude, or place? Rene counters that if God does allow us to be deceived, it would appear to be contrary to his benevolence to allow us to be deceived at times. In line with this is how he argued. I cannot be certain that God did not deceive me about the things I know perfectly. If I cannot be certain that God did not deceive me about the things I know, then I have a reason to doubt everything, even those things I know perfectly. So, I have a reason to doubt everything, even those things I know perfectly. Nevertheless, he supposes that instead of God, who is infinitely good and the source of truth, some evil genius who is equally as strong as a liar has dedicated his entire being to truth. Rene then explained that steadfastly hold on to this belief, and if it is not possible to learn any truth by this method, at least to spend that judgment. Despite how strong and cunning he may be, make a solid effort to resist believing anything false or being forced by the deceiver. However, because it is a tremendous effort, we might find ourselves unintentionally slipping back into the old routine. And, just as a captive who, while sleeping, enjoys an imaginary liberty, fears to awaken, and conspires with disagreeable illusions to prolong the deception, so unconsciously, by your own volition, revert to previous beliefs and dread waking up from this slumber for fear that laborious alertness that would follow the serenity of this rest would have to be spent not in daylight but in the extreme darkness.
There are 3 skeptical arguments presented in the first meditation. So skeptical arguments attempt to show that we cannot know or be certain of something we ordinarily believe. Descartes considered these arguments as a reason to doubt all of his sensory beliefs. The first argument is the sensory deception argument. So Descartes argued that senses are deceptive. So he believes that it is a mark of prudence never to place our complete trust into something that deceived us even once. However, he soon rejected this argument. Even though he says that our senses sometimes deceives us, it does not necessarily mean that we have to doubt all of our sensory beliefs. In conclusion, if our senses are not the foundation of our knowledge, then it would be surprising if the true nature of reality is at odds with what our senses tells us. The second argument is the dream argument. So Descartes stated that he is a man who is accustomed to sleeping at night. He believes that there are no definitive signs in distinguishing being awake from being asleep. This is how he argued. He cannot distinguish being awake from being asleep. So if he cannot distinguish being awake from being asleep, then he has a reason to doubt his sensory beliefs. Then he doubts his sensory beliefs. Under the second argument, which is the dream argument, we have here the painter analogy. So according to Descartes, a painter cannot represent a new creature without combining the features of other creatures that one has seen. So, our dreams cannot give us entirely false streams of sensory experiences. It has to combine our sensory experiences we actually had when we were awake. So even when the dream argument gives us a reason to doubt, the painter analogy taught us that the things inside our dream are actually products of the reality's combination. However, Descartes counter-argued his own argument. He says that a painter can make something so novel that nothing like it has ever been seen before. Again, he realizes that his dreams could be entirely false. However, he insists that to create something so novel, there must be basic ingredients, which are the corporeal nature and its extension, shape of extended things, quantity, size and number, place where they exist, time they endure, and the like. To sum up, the dream argument and the painter analogy gives us a reason to doubt all of our sensory beliefs. From the last two arguments, Descartes believes that most, if not all, of his sensory beliefs cannot serve as a certain foundation for knowledge. He argues that God, who is known to be supremely good, would not have deceived him. However, if God deceives him about this matter, then on the contrary, he is not good. So this is how Descartes argued. He cannot be certain that God did not deceive him about the things he knows perfectly. If he cannot be certain that God did not deceive him about the things he knows, then he has a reason to doubt everything, even those things he knows perfectly. So, he has a reason to doubt everything, even those things he knows perfectly.
On the second meditation, he said that the first meditation filled his mind with so many doubts. Descartes starts off by expressing a strong degree of skepticism regarding the accuracy of his senses and perceptions. He said, "I shall proceed by setting aside all that in which the least doubt could be supposed to exist, just as if I had discovered that it was absolutely false. And I shall ever allow in this road until I have met with something which is certain, or at least, if I can do nothing else, until I have learned for certain that there is nothing in the world that is certain." In order to have a complete grasp of reality, Descartes seeks absolute certainty. He cites Archimedes as an example, who required a fixed point in order to move the earth. Similar to this, Descartes seeks to establish his system of knowledge on something that is absolutely certain. His philosophical exploration in the Meditations is motivated by this quest for assurance. He considers the idea that he has perceived through his senses might be an illusion or deception, which calls into question the entire basis of his beliefs. In order to build a strong basis for knowledge, this skepticism is an important phase in his philosophical methodology. The famous Descartes statement, "Cogito, ergo sum," which translates as "I think, therefore I am," is a key idea in his philosophy. He realizes that even if all of his perceptions and sensory experiences were false, the process of doubt and thought itself serves as evidence that the thinking self exists, which leads him to this conclusion. In other words, he must exist if he is having a doubt or contemplating. But do you clearly know who are you? I who am certain that I am. Descartes then questioned if what did he formerly believe he was. He believed that he was a man. But what is a man? In the first place, he considered himself having a face, hands, arms, and all the system of members composed of bones and flesh, and considered that he was nourished, that he can walk and feel. Descartes places emphasis on the distinct separation of the soul from the body. According to Descartes, the body is a physical object with extension that can be sensed by the senses. The soul, on the other hand, is not tangible and is not directly perceptible. In Cartesian dualism, which holds that the soul and body are distinct substances, this divergence becomes a key idea. Then he said, "I am, however, a real thing and really exists." But what thing? I have answered, a thing which thinks. Descartes then muses on his true knowledge of himself. He acknowledges that he primarily thinks of himself as a mind, a soul, or a thinking thing. He makes a distinction between this thinking self and the body, implying that this thinking self's existence is more fundamental than his physical form. But what then am I? A thing which thinks. But what is a thing which thinks? It is a thing which doubts, understands, affirms, or denies. I am the same who feels, that is to say, who perceives things, as by the organs of sense, since in truth I see light, I hear noise, I feel heat. But it will be said that these phenomena are false and that I am dreaming. Let it be so. Still, it is at least quite certain that it seems to me that I see light, that I hear noise, and that I feel heat. That cannot be false, properly speaking it as what is in me called feeling. From this time, Descartes began to know a little more clearness and distinct than before. However, he still cannot prevent himself from thinking. But now, he can clearly see how the case stands. His mind loves to wander, and cannot yet suffer itself to be retained within the just limits of truth. Descartes then illustrates his point on the mind's capacity for understanding and perceiving things by using the example of a piece of wax. He contends that the mind can still identify the wax as the same thing by an act of understanding, even if the wax's sensory attributes change. For example, when it melts and loses its original features. This illustrates the mind's ability to understand an object's true nature beyond its sensory appearances. But what is this piece of wax which cannot be understood excepting by the mind? It is certainly the same that you see, touch, imagine, and finally, it is the same which you have always believed it from the beginning. But what must particularly be observed is that its perception is neither an act of vision, nor of touch, nor of imagination. And now, perception of wax has been more clearer and more distinct, not only after the sight or the touch, but also after with how many much more evidences and distinctness must it be said that I know now. And finally, Descartes clearly see that there is nothing which is easier for us to know than our mind. In conclusion, Descartes' Meditation 2 is a philosophical exploration that starts with profound skepticism, but ends with the undeniable proof that the thinking self is real. He draws a distinction between the mind and the body, and emphasizes the superiority of clear, precise, intellectual knowledge over sensory perception. His subsequent meditation will build this one as he continues to investigate the sources of knowledge and the nature of reality. In Meditation 2, Descartes holds the following values. 1. Everything that has a reason to doubt is completely false. 2. Only certain things are true. For the first argument, the Hogito argument. In the last argument of Meditation 1, the deceiving God argument, he found a reason to doubt the existence of everything in this world. He then started to doubt in Meditation 2 his own existence. He established that he exists, but it's not certain what type of thing is he. His argument goes like this. I am thinking. If I am capable of thinking, then I exist. I exist. The next question he dwelled upon is the possibility of a thought to occur without a thinker. His argument goes like this. A thought is happening. If a thought is happening, then there is a thinker. So a thinker exists. However, that argument does not imply that Descartes exists, but only some thinker exists. He then became certain that he exists. However, he is not sure what this thing is. The nature of I that thinks. In the last argument, it is known that Descartes is aware that he exists. However, he does not yet understand sufficiently what he is. Descartes used to think that he has a body, a face, hands, and arms. But as stated in the deceiving God argument, he might be deceived by an all-powerful deceiver called God. So he considers that his body is false. He does not have a body. All that he got now is that he is nothing but a thinking thing, because he has a reason to doubt that he has a body. What is a thinking thing? According to Descartes, a thinking thing is a thing that doubts, understands, affirms, denies, wills, refuses, and that also imagines and senses. Imagining for Descartes involves being aware of mental images, so this cannot exist without a body. Sensing, however, involves being aware of things by using your senses. One cannot sense without organs and without a body. One cannot have sense organs. In conclusion, Descartes is not sure if he can actually imagine or sense, since he is in doubt if he has a body. There are two important ideas in this argument. Descartes argued that all the things he thinks about are thoughts, including sensing and imagining, as mode of thoughts. Everything he thinks about thought is everything he is aware of. There is no thought that he is not aware about. He concludes that he is a thinking thing, and he is aware of everything he thinks about himself. A piece of wax taken recently from a honeycomb is still smelling honey. It has a particular color, shape, size, and easy to touch. Once this piece of wax has been exposed to fire, all these qualities will change. This wax will lose its original color, shape, and size. However, no one will deny that it is the same wax recently got from the honeycomb. With this, Descartes concludes that none of the qualities mentioned are essential to the wax. If none of this is essential, then what is the essential to it? His argument goes like this. I understand that the only thing essential to the wax is its extension. I could not understand that the only thing essential to the wax is its extension, through my imagination or sensation. So I understand that the only thing essential to the wax is its extension through my mind alone.